It was just after dawn when Hannah Ellison stepped out onto the porch of her log cabin, tucked away at the edge of Montana's Bitterroot National Forest. The air was sharp with the crisp scent of pine, and the morning fog still clung to the trees like ghosts reluctant to leave. For most people, this would be the edge of the world, a place too quiet, too wild. But for Hannah, it was home. A quiet life, one she had chosen after the stormy chaos of her old world as a wildlife biologist for the government. All she wanted now was solitude, silence, and the animals she'd always loved. She cradled her coffee cup, its steam dancing into the chill, and turned to check the path where deer sometimes wandered near her garden fence. That's when she heard it. Not the rustling of a rabbit or the call of a distant hawk, this was something else. A sound so raw it made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. A deep, low growl mixed with a heavy, trembling sob. Her breath caught as the bushes just beyond her property began to move. Branches cracked, the underbrush shifting with urgent, uneven steps. She took one cautious step back toward her door. Then, from between the trees, emerged something Hannah would never forget. A massive grizzly bear. But this bear was not charging. She was not angry, not threatening. She was limping. And more than that, she was crying. Actual tears stained her fur as she grunted and groaned, nudging forward something small, something fragile, lying limp in the snow. A cub. Hannah froze. Her instinct told her to run, to get inside and slam the door, but something deeper held her in place. The bear didn't snarl or roar. She looked at Hannah with a gaze that wasn't wild or aggressive, it was pleading. The cub wasn't moving. Its little body was soaked and shivering, fur matted with dirt and blood. Hannah's heart broke. She had seen dying animals before, too many in her career. But never had she witnessed something like this, a mother bear bringing her dying cub not to a den or safe place, but to a human. To her. It didn't make sense. Wild animals avoided humans. Especially bears. Especially a mother with a cub. And yet here this enormous grizzly was, trusting her, hoping for something. Hannah dropped to her knees slowly, hands raised, voice soft. "It's okay," she whispered, not sure who she was comforting, herself, the mother, or the dying cub. "It's okay, girl. I'm not gonna hurt you." The mother bear stepped back, her breathing labored, as if she had traveled miles on sheer will alone. Her flanks heaved, and for a moment, Hannah feared the bear herself might collapse. But the bear didn't move toward her or away. She just stood there and waited. Hannah inched forward toward the cub. Its breathing was shallow, barely there. She could see signs of infection around a deep gash on its side, and its eyes were glazed, barely open. She looked back at the bear, whose gaze never left her. No growl. No bluff charge. Only trust. "I need to help him," Hannah murmured, her fingers trembling. "But you have to let me." The bear huffed, her body swaying slightly from exhaustion. Then she did something Hannah never expected, she laid down. The full weight of that moment hit Hannah like a wave. She had spent years studying animal behavior, but nothing in any journal or textbook could explain this. She scooped the cub into her arms, careful not to aggravate its wound. The tiny body was light, almost weightless. As she stood, the mother bear watched every movement but did nothing. Her massive paws remained where they were. Her breath came heavy, but her eyes were full of something ancient and sacred, hope. Hannah backed away slowly, holding the cub to her chest, her voice steady and low. "Stay there, girl. I'll help him. I promise. She entered her cabin, heart racing. This was no ordinary wildlife situation. No ranger station or rescue center could handle this. This was something else entirely. And she had no idea what was coming next. She cleared a table, laid down the cub, and got to work. Her hands moved on instinct, cleaning, stitching, disinfecting. All the while, her eyes darted to the window. The bear hadn't moved. She sat outside, waiting, the way only a mother would. Hours passed. The cub moaned faintly, a sign of life. Hannah's breath caught with every sound. She was doing everything she could, but deep down, she feared it might not be enough. She looked at the mother bear again, still sitting in the same spot, like a statue of strength and sorrow. What kind of bond had led this animal to defy every natural instinct, every ancient fear, just to bring her baby to a human? That question stayed with Hannah long into the night. As she sat by the cub's side, gently stroking its tiny paw, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just an animal rescue. It was something extraordinary. Outside, the wind picked up, howling through the trees. A storm was rolling in. Thunder rumbled in the distance. And still, the bear remained. Then, just as lightning cracked the sky, a loud noise echoed through the woods. A metallic clank, followed by the unmistakable crunch of tires on gravel. Hannah looked up, startled. No one should be out here. Not at this hour. Not in this weather. She moved to the window and peered through the rain-streaked glass. A black SUV was parked at the edge of her driveway. And behind it, another. Her stomach dropped. Men in dark uniforms stepped out, their expressions unreadable. One of them carried what looked like a tranquilizer rifle. Another had a tablet, checking coordinates. They weren't lost hikers. They weren't rangers. They were looking for something. Or someone. She turned back to the cub, then to the bear still waiting in the storm. Whatever this was, it was just beginning. Mary hadn't slept a wink. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the mother bear's face, those glassy, grief-stricken eyes pleading for help. It was something no one could ever truly prepare for. A bear, wild and free, showing trust and desperation, all for the sake of her dying cub. Mary sat at her kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee gone cold, her mind spinning. The tiny cub lay wrapped in blankets in her barn's old horse stall, barely breathing. The mother bear hadn't left the property. She paced along the tree line, eyes fixed on the barn, as though she understood her baby's life depended on the woman inside. Mary's background wasn't in veterinary care. She had been a park ranger, yes, but she specialized in trail safety and wildlife conservation. Not medical emergencies. Still, instincts kicked in. She'd cleared out the stall, padded it with hay and wool, and set up a makeshift lamp using old heat bulbs from her chicken coop. She'd called a local animal rescue center and left a message, but it was nearly dark, and she doubted anyone would be out this far tonight. She was utterly alone with a dying wild animal and its grieving mother. The cub's condition was critical. It was dehydrated, barely moving, and had a wound on its hind leg, possibly from a trap or a predator. Mary disinfected the gash as gently as she could, whispering softly to calm herself more than the bear. She used water and honey to try to perk the little one up, hoping natural sugar would give it a boost. It stirred, but barely. Outside, the mother bear huffed and groaned in low, guttural sounds, every now and then rising to two legs before lowering again. Mary could feel the mother's heartbreak in her bones. She wasn't ready to give up. Word spread quickly in the small mountain community. By morning, her land was crawling with curiosity seekers and local wildlife officials. Some wanted to tranquilize the mother bear. Others warned Mary she was putting herself and everyone else at risk. But Mary refused to let them near her. "This bear trusted me," she told them. "She came to me because she knew I would help." The media caught wind. By the second afternoon, a local news van was parked near the property entrance. The headline on the morning radio said, "Grieving mother bear brings cub to human in unprecedented act of trust." The story struck a chord. People across the region tuned in, captivated by the bizarre and deeply emotional tale unfolding in the woods. Meanwhile, Mary dug deeper into what could have happened to the cub. She suspected foul play. The wound wasn't natural. It looked like a trap injury, but no one was allowed to trap near her land. That suspicion opened another subplot: illegal hunting. Mary remembered hearing gunshots a week ago, deep in the forest. She dismissed them at the time, thinking maybe a neighbor was clearing coyotes, but now it made her wonder. Could someone be breaking the law, harming protected wildlife? A new character entered the scene: Thomas Rigsby, a seasoned wildlife biologist sent by the state. He had a quiet demeanor and a reputation for connecting with animals in unusual ways. When he arrived, he knelt before the pacing mother bear, whispering, almost humming. The bear, though cautious, didn't attack. She watched him. He didn't move toward her, only sat on the ground as if waiting for permission to be there. Mary watched him closely. She didn't trust many people with animals, but there was something in Thomas's eyes: patience, empathy, experience. Still, she kept close to the barn, guarding the cub like a mother herself. Thomas examined the cub carefully under Mary's supervision. This wound was made by something man-made, he confirmed. It wasn't a fight with another animal. They were dealing with a criminal. That news caused a stir. The forest wasn't as untouched as it had seemed. Someone out there was trapping or hunting in violation of state protection laws. And they'd nearly killed a cub to do it. While the cub slowly improved, tension brewed. Officials argued about what to do with the mother bear. She was too close to humans now, they said. She might come back again. She could be dangerous. Mary fought them off with words sharper than claws. If she wanted to hurt anyone, she would have done it already. She came asking for help. And you want to punish her for that? Thomas backed her up. He provided expert testimony that the bear showed no signs of aggression, only deep distress and maternal instinct. She made the rarest choice, he said to the cameras one evening. She crossed the line between wild and human out of desperation. And this woman answered that call. Social media exploded. Hashtags like #MotherBear and #SaveTheCub started trending. Animal rights groups reached out, offering support, legal protection, and even funding to build a proper sanctuary. What started as a quiet act of empathy had become a national story, pulling people into a powerful conversation about wildlife, compassion, and how humans treat the animals they share land with. But not everyone supported Mary. One anonymous caller left a message on her landline. "You should have let nature take its course." Another note was slipped under her door: "Stay out of the woods if you know what's good for you." The signs of illegal activity were growing clearer, and more threatening. Whoever was behind the trap that hurt the cub didn't want to be exposed. And now, Mary was standing in their way. Thomas offered to stay on the property for a few nights. Mary agreed. Between watching over the cub and keeping an eye out for trespassers, she didn't sleep much. She started locking the barn, not just for the bear's protection, but for her own. Then, one night, they heard movement. Footsteps in the woods. Low voices. A flashlight beam. Mary and Thomas peered through the window. Someone was trying to get close to the barn. Thomas stepped out with a camera, and the figures fled. But not before he caught a clear shot of one of their faces. That photo changed everything. But that's where the story is headed next. Mary couldn't stop staring at the photo on Thomas's camera. The image wasn't crystal clear, but it was good enough. A man's face caught in the beam of a flashlight, jaw clenched, eyes wide, someone who hadn't expected to be seen. Mary didn't recognize him, but Thomas did. "That's Bill Darden," he said, his voice low. "Used to work for the local logging company until they were fined for illegal clearing. I heard rumors he's been trapping and selling pelts under the radar." The name made Mary's stomach turn. She remembered Darden from years back, rough around the edges, always with something to prove, someone who thought the forest belonged to him. It made sense. The wound on the bear cub's leg, the threat slipped under her door, the sudden appearance of strangers in the night, it all pointed to someone with a lot to lose if the truth came out. But she had no proof of his illegal activity, only a photo of him near her barn in the middle of the night. And that wasn't enough. Meanwhile, the cub, whom Mary had started calling Little Ash because of his smoky gray fur, was gaining strength. He still couldn't stand for long, but he was responding to care. Every tiny movement brought hope. The mother bear never left the tree line, keeping constant vigil. Her presence was quiet but unshakable, and it grounded Mary like nothing else. Each morning she'd step out with food and water, watching the mother bear watch her. They had settled into a fragile rhythm built entirely on trust. The story had gone viral. Journalists showed up at the edge of Mary's property every day, hoping to get a quote or a glance of the bears. Mary refused interviews, but one camera captured a moment that hit millions online, a clip of the mother bear gently placing a paw on the barn door at dusk, almost as if knocking. The footage sparked massive emotional reactions. People wrote letters, sent donations, even offered help from abroad. But as the public interest grew, so did the pressure. Wildlife authorities were divided. Some wanted to relocate the mother bear before she got too accustomed to humans. Others pushed to have the cub taken to a rehabilitation center. Mary was caught in the middle, knowing full well that separating them might be the same as sentencing the cub to die. She brought him here for a reason, she kept telling them. Taking him away now would destroy her. Thomas supported her, but his hands were tied. Once the higher-ups get involved, it gets political, he warned. It's not just about the cub anymore, it's about public perception, budget decisions, jurisdiction. That's when Mary realized this wasn't just about one bear cub. It had become a symbol. A mother's desperation. A broken system. A wild animal's faith in a human being. Subplots began to unravel quietly around the edges. Sheriff Lang, a longtime friend of Mary's late husband, came by one evening with a heavy look in his eyes. "Darden's name has come up before," he said slowly. "We found traps in restricted areas, but never caught him with anything illegal. No one ever talks, and without evidence, my hands stay tied." He paused. "But if you're willing to press charges for trespassing, I can start something." Mary nodded. It wasn't much, but it was a start. As the days passed, she noticed strange things. One morning, the feed buckets were turned over, and her barn door slightly ajar. Nothing was missing, but it felt like a warning. Another time, she found boot prints near the fence line, deep, fresh, too large to be Thomas's. She began locking everything and carried her phone in her back pocket, just in case. Yet through all this, the cub slowly healed. He'd begun to stand for a few seconds at a time, and even attempted a weak growl when Thomas approached too quickly. The mother bear responded with a soft rumble from outside, as if encouraging him. Mary documented every moment in a worn notebook: food intake, movements, breathing patterns. She wanted records. Not just for the officials, but for herself. Proof that she had done the right thing. Then came a call that sent chills through her. It was from a blocked number. A man's voice, low and cold. "You're making trouble. Let the bear die, and this all goes away." Then a click. Mary froze. It wasn't just about threats anymore. It was real. She called the sheriff immediately, who installed a motion-activated camera system on her land. They also began a formal investigation into illegal trapping in the region, quietly gathering information while trying not to scare off anyone watching Mary's property. The mood shifted. What started as a heartfelt rescue was turning into something much more dangerous. Thomas suggested reaching out to a National Wildlife Foundation, and Mary agreed. Soon, a representative named Carmen flew in, an expert in wildlife law and rescue policy. Carmen met the bears, reviewed Mary's notes, and toured the property. She was impressed by what she saw, but deeply concerned by the threats. "You're at the center of something bigger than just this rescue," Carmen told her. "You're putting pressure on people who've been operating unchecked for years. This story is their worst nightmare." Still, Carmen promised help. The foundation would fund protective fencing and offer legal support if Mary chose to press charges or resist orders to remove the bears. But that also meant drawing more attention, more resistance. The tension was rising. Thomas grew quiet and watchful. Mary kept her phone close. The mother bear grew restless, pacing more often, as if sensing something was coming. And one night, under the cloak of silence, someone returned. This time they cut the fence. The camera caught only part of it, a shadowy figure slipping through the gap, moving fast toward the barn. Inside, Mary was already awake, alerted by little Ash's weak cries. She grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside just as the figure reached the door. A beam of light flashed across a familiar face, Bill Darden. Their eyes locked. He froze for just a second, then turned and ran. Mary chased for a few steps before stopping. She wasn't going to catch him. But she had what she needed. She called the sheriff. Within an hour, deputies arrived. The fence was damaged. Boot prints led into the woods. And most importantly, the photo from the motion camera clearly showed Darden's face near the barn. As the officials gathered evidence and secured the property, Mary walked back to the barn. The mother bear stood just a few feet from her now, silent but alert. Mary looked into her eyes and whispered, "We're not out of the woods yet. But we're getting closer." The wind stirred the trees above, and somewhere in the forest, justice was finally starting to stir. Would you like the next part to push the story toward the final confrontation or continue developing the INV? The days grew colder, and with each passing hour, the atmosphere around Mary's property thickened with unease. The once serene forest now felt like a stage set for an impending confrontation. Mary could sense it in the way the wind whispered through the trees, in the restless pacing of the mother bear, and in the shadows that seemed to linger a bit too long. Little Ash, the cub, had shown remarkable resilience. His wounds were healing, and he had begun to take tentative steps around the barn. The mother bear watched over him with a mix of hope and anxiety, her eyes never straying far from her cub. Mary had grown attached to them, her days consumed with their care and protection. Thomas, ever vigilant, had installed additional security measures around the property. Motion sensors, cameras, and reinforced locks became part of their daily routine. Despite these precautions, the sense of impending danger loomed large. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the landscape, Mary received a call from Sheriff Lang. "We've been monitoring some chatter," he said. "Seems like there's talk of making a move soon. We're increasing patrols in your area, but stay alert." Mary's heart raced. She knew that the illegal trappers, feeling the pressure of the investigation, might act out of desperation. Her property, now a symbol of resistance, was a likely target. That night, sleep eluded her. She sat by the window, eyes scanning the darkness, ears attuned to every rustle and creak. The mother bear was unusually agitated, pacing and huffing, her instincts sensing the tension in the air. Suddenly, a faint light flickered in the distance. Mary's breath caught. She grabbed her flashlight and quietly made her way to the barn. Inside, little Ash stirred, sensing his mother's unease. Mary whispered soothing words, trying to calm both herself and the animals. Outside, the light grew brighter, accompanied by the crunch of footsteps on gravel. Mary's grip tightened on the flashlight. She peeked through a crack in the barn door and saw figures approaching, 3 men, their faces obscured by hoods, moving with purpose. Her mind raced. She needed to protect the bears, but confronting the intruders alone was risky. She reached for her phone, only to realize it was still inside the house. Panic surged, but she forced herself to stay calm. The men reached the barn door, attempting to force it open. Mary knew she had to act. She banged a metal rod against the wall, creating a loud clamor. The sudden noise startled the intruders, causing them to hesitate. At that moment, the mother bear let out a deep, resonant growl, emerging from the shadows to stand protectively in front of the barn. The men froze, clearly not expecting to confront an angry bear. One of them stumbled back, tripping over a root. The others hesitated, torn between their mission and the immediate danger. The standoff was tense, the air thick with anticipation. Suddenly, headlights pierced the darkness as a patrol car pulled up, sirens blaring. The intruders scattered, disappearing into the woods. Sheriff Lang and his deputies emerged, weapons drawn, scanning the area. Mary stepped out, relief washing over her. The mother bear, sensing the threat had passed, retreated to her cub's side. Mary approached the officers, recounting the events. They assured her that they would continue to monitor the area and intensify their search for the perpetrators. The confrontation had been averted, but the threat remained. Mary knew that the battle was far from over, but she also knew that she wasn't alone. With the support of the community, the authorities, and the indomitable spirit of the bears, she was ready to face whatever came next. The forest held its breath, the story of the crying mother bear and her cub unfolding with each passing day, leading inexorably toward a climax that would test the strength and resolve of all involved. Just as Dr. Elise Turner stood at the edge of her makeshift pen, watching the mother bear nudge her cub as if urging it to stay alive, something strange happened. The cub's breathing slowed, not from weakness this time, but in rhythm. Controlled. Elise squinted, stepped closer. The cub's eyes opened, slightly, as if it were waking from something rather than dying. Her heart pounded. "That's not just a recovery," she whispered. That's intentional. She turned to grab her satchel and call her assistant to note the sudden change, but stopped. A sound came from the trees. Low, guttural, but not the mother bear. Something else. A second growl, but heavier. Elise froze. The mother bear lifted her head instantly, ears raised, body tense. She moved away from her cub and stood between Elise and the trees. The forest had gone silent. Elise slowly backed toward her vehicle, hands shaking as it brushed against her radio. "Kyle," she whispered into the mic, "something's out here." Not the mother. Something bigger. Then, breaking through the line of trees, a massive shadow moved. It wasn't a bear. It was something else, something no one in this area had ever seen. Thick fur. Broad, too broad. Elise blinked, heart racing. A hybrid? Her mind was searching through every documented species, trying to categorize what she was seeing. But the strangest thing wasn't the creature's size. It was the way it looked straight at the cub, not her. The mother bear gave a deep warning growl, but the creature didn't flinch. It stood there, watching. Then, as if on some unseen cue, the cub opened its eyes fully, and the strange animal turned and vanished as quickly as it had come. What was that? Kyle's voice crackled through the radio. "I don't know," Elise replied, her breath shaky. "But I think that cub isn't just sick. I think someone, or something, is watching it. Protecting it." Kyle arrived moments later, glancing nervously at the trees. Elise told him what she saw. He looked at her like she'd lost her mind. But the tracks were there, twice as wide as a grizzly's. Deeper, too. The cameras they had set up caught nothing. Whatever that was, it had somehow moved through high-tech security without leaving a digital trace. The story that had begun as an act of compassion was shifting into something much larger. Later that night, Elise sat in her cabin reviewing the data on the cub's vitals. They made no sense. The cub's heart rate had briefly dropped to near death, then stabilized into near human-like rhythmic waves. It was impossible. No known bear physiology could do that. And stranger still, the cub's blood samples had traces of synthetic proteins, nothing she had ever seen in wildlife. Someone had done something to this animal. This wasn't a natural illness. This was deliberate. She began to pull up records. National park logs. Missing wildlife reports. Any similar incidents. And that's when she found something chilling. 4 years ago, in Alaska, a park ranger had documented a similar event, a bear cub found with unexplainable symptoms, only to vanish days later along with its mother. No traces. No footprints. Just an eerie silence. The ranger's report was buried, marked restricted. Elise's credentials shouldn't have even let her see it, yet here it was. And on the report was a single note, related to Project Echo. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard. Project Echo. She had never heard of it. She tried digging deeper, but every link led to dead ends or required clearance far beyond hers. Back at the enclosure, the mother bear refused to leave. The cub, though weak, seemed more alert now. It kept looking at Elise, and there was a strange clarity in its gaze, as though it recognized her. As though it were waiting for something. Then Kyle walked in, pale and out of breath. "Elise, there's a drone hovering over the forest. Military grade." I checked. And that's not all. There's a team in dark SUVs parked just past the old ranger station. No tags. No insignia. Elise's heart dropped. They're watching us. But why? Kyle asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she moved quickly, packing up her research files and blood samples. If this was related to some buried experiment, someone powerful didn't want it discovered. The bear and her cub weren't just an emotional story anymore. They were evidence. As night fell again, the atmosphere grew heavier. Outside, the forest buzzed with tension. Kyle stayed near the cabin door, a flashlight in one hand and bear spray in the other. Elise didn't sleep. She kept reviewing every bit of data she had, until a new realization hit her. The synthetic protein in the cub's blood, it wasn't just random. It matched a prototype developed by a biotech firm linked to military animal research. The project had been defunded years ago due to ethical concerns, allegations of testing on endangered species, rumors of genetic manipulation. And now, a bear cub, nearly dead, shows up on her land, guided by its own mother to a human. Elise's research might have just uncovered a secret someone had worked very hard to bury. Then, the next morning, they awoke to the sound of helicopters. Low, thudding, aggressive. From the tree line, uniformed men emerged. Not park rangers. Not local police. But some kind of special ops unit. Elise didn't hesitate. She grabbed the samples, secured the cub in its crate, and turned to Kyle. We're getting out. Now. But they'll stop us. Then we make sure we get the truth out before they do. Just as they opened the rear door, the mother bear reared up, sensing danger. She didn't charge, but she stood tall, protecting Elise and her cub. The soldiers stopped. They weren't prepared for this. One raised a weapon. The others froze. Elise stepped forward, heart racing. You can't take them. This animal isn't just a bear, it's part of something you tried to hide. And now everyone will know. A brief standoff hung in the air. Then, just as suddenly as they came, the soldiers retreated, silent, almost reluctant. As the roar of the helicopters faded, Kyle turned to her. What just happened? I think, she said, we just crossed a line we weren't supposed to. And they weren't ready for us to cross it. But she knew this wasn't over. Something was still out there in the forest. And that bear cub? It wasn't just fighting to survive. It was a key to something far bigger than either of them had imagined. Elise didn't waste a second. The silence left by the retreating helicopters was heavy, almost unnatural, like the air itself was holding its breath. She and Kyle packed the blood samples, her notes, and every memory card from their wildlife cameras into a sealed container. The mother bear remained still, planted like a sentry between them and the tree line, eyes fixed on the place where the soldiers had vanished. The cub, though still weak, tried to lift its head. Elise gently stroked its fur, whispering, "We're going to fix this. I promise." She and Kyle drove the old Jeep down the narrow forest road, heading toward a ranger station with a satellite uplink. Her plan was simple but risky. Upload all their findings, including the drone footage, the cub's blood data, and the old Alaska report, to a secure cloud and send it to independent journalists and researchers who couldn't be bought or silenced. But halfway down the road, they were blocked again. A black SUV, one of the same from the earlier sighting, was parked sideways across the path. Men in plain black tactical gear stood beside it, no badges, no names. One stepped forward with a calm, cold smile. "We don't want any trouble, Dr. Turner," he said. "But we can't let you leave with that animal." Elise didn't flinch. Then you're going to have to take it from me. The man raised his hand, signaling his team forward. But before they could move, a deafening roar thundered from behind. The mother bear, she had followed them, and she was furious. She stormed out of the trees, stopping just short of the SUV, rearing up tall. The men instinctively pulled weapons. But something about the way she looked at them froze them in place. It wasn't just rage, it was intelligence. Then, in a moment no one expected, the cub made a sound. Weak, but clear. A call. The mother paused and turned, and so did everyone else. The cub wasn't alone in that sound. From the trees behind the jeep came more rustling. Movement. Then, one by one, more bears appeared. 6. No, 8. All silently stepping out of the forest. They didn't growl, didn't charge. They just stood there, surrounding the clearing, as if standing guard. The armed men backed up slowly. The leader's voice was suddenly tight. What is this? Elise looked at him. You did something to them. You made them smarter. Stronger. But you didn't expect them to remember. Or work together. And then, the final piece of the puzzle dropped into place. Kyle, who had stayed by the jeep, yelled, Elise. Come here, look at this. She ran to him, heart pounding. He held up one of the memory cards, still warm from the dash. The footage from their infrared camera showed the moment the cub collapsed before being brought to Elise's cabin. But it also showed something else. A man, fully cloaked, face covered, had approached the cub just hours before. He had injected something into it, then disappeared into the woods. It wasn't just a military experiment gone wrong. It was a controlled release. A test. They wanted to see if the mother would bring it here, Elise said, almost breathless. To me. They've been watching me. Watching how I'd respond. How far I'd go to protect it. Kyle's face darkened. So we were the experiment. The realization sent a chill down her spine. They hadn't stumbled into a conspiracy, they were part of one. And worse, this wasn't the first time. The Alaska case, and probably others buried deep, were all stages in a larger, more dangerous game. Still standing in front of the SUV, the leader suddenly looked less confident. One wrong move, and every bear in that clearing might charge. But Elise stepped forward. She knew she had one shot to end this without anyone getting hurt. You can try to stop us, she said clearly, her voice carrying across the tension, but this footage is already being uploaded. Multiple sources. Independent researchers. You can't hide this anymore. The man stared at her for a long moment. Then he signaled his team again, this time, to lower their weapons. It's not over, he said. You've made powerful enemies. She gave a small, exhausted smile. Then I guess they'll have to get in line. The SUVs turned and drove off, melting into the forest road like ghosts. The bears began to retreat, one by one, back into the woods. Only the mother remained, close to the jeep, watching Elise closely. Then she gently approached the cub, nuzzled it one last time, and without a sound, turned and disappeared. The drive back to town was quiet. Elise finally allowed herself to breathe. She looked at Kyle. You think anyone will believe this? He gave a half laugh. After that? I think they'll have to. Later that night, as Elise sat by the fireplace in her cabin, she received an alert. Her files had been downloaded, by 3 different investigative reporters and 1 renowned environmental agency. Within days, the footage was on every major platform, news outlets were chasing the story, and wildlife protection groups were demanding answers. The government denied everything, of course. But people were already asking too many questions. And in the midst of it all, Elise kept working quietly. She kept the cub under observation, now fully recovering. It had moments of strange behavior, watching her too closely, reacting to words, seeming to listen more than most animals should. But it wasn't aggressive. It just seemed aware. One evening, she noticed something even more startling. On a table beside its enclosure, the cub gently pawed at a tablet Elise had left open. The screen flashed with footage from the day of the standoff, and the cub froze. Its paw hovered, and it tapped the screen once. Then it looked at Elise. As if it understood. She stepped back, stunned. And then she whispered, "What are you?" Outside, in the shadows of the trees, a figure watched from a distance. The same cloaked man from the footage. He said nothing, just turned and disappeared deeper into the forest. Because this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The days after the encounter felt like something between a blur and a storm. Elise barely slept. Between the non-stop emails from journalists, interview requests, and global conservation groups wanting to meet with her, it was overwhelming. But at the center of it all, still resting in a safe enclosure behind her cabin, was the bear cub. It was recovering well, its breathing stronger, eyes clearer, even gaining some weight. But it was more than just physically healthier. There was a look in its eyes now, sharp, focused. Elise couldn't ignore it anymore. This wasn't just a bear cub. Something inside it had changed. Kyle stayed close, helping to organize the evidence they had gathered. They didn't trust sending it through public channels anymore. Too many strange calls, unmarked letters showing up at Elise's cabin door. Whoever was behind this experiment, or operation, or whatever it truly was, wasn't finished. But Elise had made a promise, to herself and to the mother bear who trusted her with her dying cub, she wouldn't let them take him again. Back in town, things began to shift. A small news outlet in Canada picked up the story, spinning it as a wildlife miracle. From there, it spread. Mother bear saves cub with help from remote biologist. Secret bear experiment in Alaska raises eyebrows. And finally, is there something the government isn't telling us about wildlife intelligence? People were fascinated and rightfully suspicious. Elise didn't feed into the conspiracies, but she did speak publicly. She shared what she had found, the altered blood cells, the strange behavioral changes, the surveillance footage. She didn't accuse anyone directly, but she laid it all out. In a calm voice during an online conference, she said, "If someone is changing nature without telling the world, then we all deserve to know. Not because we're afraid, but because we have a responsibility to protect life, even when it doesn't look like what we expect." Support came quickly. Animal rights groups donated security cameras and supplies to help Elise continue her research safely. Environmental scientists from 3 different countries asked to collaborate. And most of all, she received letters, hundreds of them, from people who felt something stir inside them when they saw the mother bear's eyes on screen. One woman wrote, "That bear knew what she was doing. She trusted you. And we all saw it." But not everyone was pleased. One evening, Kyle found a strange metal tag nailed into a tree behind the cabin. No markings, no explanation. Just a number. Elise didn't recognize it, but Kyle did. It was a test marker, something used in military field trials. It meant someone had been back. Maybe they never left. So Elise moved the cub to a private sanctuary 2 towns over. Run by a friend, heavily monitored, and legally protected. She made the transfer quietly, under the cover of early morning fog. When they arrived, the cub seemed calm, almost like it understood this was its next safe place. It didn't struggle. Just pressed its forehead gently against Elise's arm before walking into the large enclosure that would be its home. Over the following weeks, Elise and Kyle stayed involved, monitoring his progress and continuing to review all the data. They found small anomalies, genetic markers that shouldn't exist in wild bears. Something synthetic. Not natural evolution. But rather than try to weaponize the truth, Elise made a different choice. She built a case study, anonymized certain parts, and submitted it to one of the top biology journals in the world. The paper was titled, "Anomalous Behavior and Genetic Modifications in North American Brown Bear Offspring, a Case of Ethical Implications and Unknown Origins." It stirred debate. Scientists from around the world weighed in. Some said it was fabricated, others demanded more proof. But the point wasn't to prove everything right away, it was to start the conversation. And Elise had done that. Back at the cabin, the forest felt quieter. Not empty, but peaceful. She would still walk the trails where she had first found the mother bear. Sometimes she thought she saw a shadow in the trees, large, steady, but it always vanished. Still, she knew the bears hadn't gone far. That mother hadn't disappeared. She was watching. Waiting. And maybe, still protecting something. The last twist came not from the forest, but from the cub himself. 3 months after his recovery began, a sanctuary worker called Elise in the middle of the night. "He's doing something strange," the voice said. "You need to see this." When she arrived, the cub was pacing in a perfect square. Pausing at each corner, then circling back. Over and over. When Elise stepped closer, he looked up, then pointed, with his nose at the digital display screen inside his habitat. The footage from the day he was found played again. He let out a soft cry. He remembered. That realization shook Elise to her core. Whatever had been done to this cub, it hadn't just changed him physically. It had elevated something in him. Memory. Intent. Connection. Elise returned to her cabin that night and wrote in her journal, "There are some things science can't measure with data. That bear came to me, not because she was desperate, but because she believed I could help." And that belief wasn't based on instinct. It was something greater. Something shared. As fall rolled into winter, and the first snow dusted the pine needles around her home, Elise sat by the fire with Kyle, sipping tea, watching the flames dance. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if we hadn't found him?" she asked. "Every day," he replied. "But I also think, maybe we didn't find him. Maybe he found us." She smiled. That felt true. The story of the mother bear and her cub would go on to inspire a documentary, a global conservation campaign, and new ethical standards around wildlife testing and genetic research. But for Elise, the most important outcome wasn't fame or recognition. It was the reminder that when we slow down, when we listen, when we stop seeing animals as statistics or dangers, and start seeing them as part of a shared life, we begin to understand just how much they've always known. In the end, it wasn't about science or secrecy. It was about trust. A trust passed between a crying mother bear and a woman in the woods, that changed everything.